All right. So for those of you who've been with us yesterday as well, welcome back. And for those of you who are coming today, welcome. My job today is to talk about what we've achieved so far in the Digital Roads program, bring that in context with everything else, and then pass it on to Lavindra, our Principal Research Associate, who can give you a lot more details on the progress. So, a bit of a background of this whole initiative. The Digital Roads of the Future initiative, of which Digital Roads is one part, is supported by these two grants, the EPSRC Prosperity Partnership called Digital Roads, and the European Commission Marie Curie co-fund program called Future Roads. As I was explaining, I think yesterday, they sort of happened because, honestly, we got lucky. We were thinking that for both of these programs, the rate of success is very, very low, below 30%. And we applied for two programs with the same remit, and we got both grants. And that allowed us to bring the resources of both grants together so that we can achieve a lot more as an outcome. And in response to that, we're very fortunate that National Highways has decided to use this as a springboard to progress the Roads Research Alliance that met yesterday officially for the second time after our founding meeting a year ago, and is now trying to expand all that work with a much broader industry network, all for the benefit of the UK within the context of highways. Now, the combined budget of this initiative is a little bit over 16 million at this point in time. We have certainly on the Alliance side and Future Roads, new businesses coming in all the time. You can see here the businesses that are involved across design, construction, maintenance, decommission, operation, and technology. Quite an expansive list, which we hope to grow over time, because of course the industry is not just these companies. There's many more out there that can benefit from this. And overall, the program has been led by some very impressive individuals across all of the businesses on digital twins, on smart materials, on data science, on automation and robotics, and on sustainability. And these investigators are supporting the individuals you see here. This is our organizational chart and how we are mixing the two grants together, with the management team supporting us on this end, and then the Digital Roads program at the top and the bottom, the senior researchers as well as the PhDs, and then our Future Roads fellows right in the middle, allowing us to expand on the work that we plan to do quite a lot more than we had initially envisioned. So what is this program trying to do? The program is trying to bring together the physical and digital aspects of roads and look at them also as a product and process, and try to significantly innovate across the quadrants, but also across the arrows that are linking those quadrants. For example, under the physical product, how can we take the existing inert materials and convert them to smart materials, aware of their state and properties, assisting their maintainers and users? Under physical process, how can we leverage automation and robotics to automate inspection and maintenance? Under the digital product, how can we take the data out of the smart materials through the robotics into the digital twin and bring that together with all the other information so that we can enable that last quadrant, the digital process, through data science, so that we can derive insights to inform design, construction, maintenance, and operations. Now that's very fuzzy and generic, and I'm sure that if I go through the rest of the slides, they won't make much sense to you until I tell you exactly how we're taking that vision into a specific example. So I'm actually changing the presentation as we go. And I'll quickly jump about 50 slides later because when we play tested that presentation, it just wasn't working well enough without presenting this slide first. And so I'll go through this slide and give you that context, which will allow you to understand everything else a lot better. So how are we bringing those pieces together? Well, we're looking at the context of maintenance. And on the maintenance front, we're looking at quick inspection in the first instance. How can we quickly understand and detect where problems are, as well as high-resolution inspection and maintenance and repair. On the quick inspection front, we are working with companies like Mercedes and Jaguar Land Rover who are already producing an amazing amount of information out of their vehicles. And looking at what they can do, for me it was very clear. There is absolutely no reason for us to do that step. They are already doing it. All we have to do is link with the car companies and bring that data in. They have cameras everywhere in the car. They have anything from accelerometers, mini weather stations measuring NOx and particles. They have, all kinds of systems on the car, many of which are not for the benefit of the driver. It's because the companies want to collect this data and sell it to clients, to infrastructure providers. And many, in fact, infrastructure providers in Europe are already getting that data on board. So that's your connected and autonomous vehicle, bringing all of that information in. And then they're coming into national highways and saying, we're offering you this data, would you like it? And what at least we hear from Mercedes is that national highways has no way of taking that data in. It is not digitized enough to bring that on board. So that's where we come in. Can we build the digital twin up there that will allow us to absorb this information and get value out of it, but also to help the cars? Because in my view, we have a lot more to give to the cars than the other way around. See, if we have a really good updated digital twin, we can help the driver predict and anticipate what they're about to do as they're driving. If the car reports to us that the road is slippery and the rain sensor says that it's raining, we can look at similar conditions from that road from previous cars and tell that car you should reduce your speed. At the same time, what the car can do for us is change detection. Is something different? Has a street sign fallen? Has a crack appeared? Has anything else changed from the maintenance perspective in this context that we need to worry about? Once we bring that change on board, we can then update the digital twin product, the model. And as a result of that change in the model, we can then fire up all the processes and analytics and try to understand what is the impact of that change. Perhaps the impact is there's nothing to do at this point. Or maybe the impact is this is a really dangerous pothole. You need to go right now and fix it. We want that decision to be almost instantaneous, and that's what the analytics can provide, and then to route it to the right direction. On one side, if this is something that is low level enough that an autonomous maintenance vehicle can handle, we want that information passed directly to the vehicle to get that job done. Please go there, fix that problem. If it's something that's more high level, more complicated, then that goes up to the human to then make decisions and understand how to best address that issue. And what this part is doing, that's another part of the project, is, okay, I know there's a problem now here. Let's go and really get to the bottom of it. First, high-resolution inspection. Really understand what the low-resolution data from the car is telling me. Let the digital twin make a better assessment out of it now that I just provided better data, and tell me what exactly I need to do. And second, if I need to do a fix, a number of 3D printing nozzles down there with smart materials able to fill cracks, paint new lane markings, fix potholes, or a number of different problems. The easy and very frequent problems that should be fixed quite easily from a vehicle of that nature. And of course, with a robotic arm for the health and safety, put the cones in, get that in place. At the end of that, go back and scan again. Have I fixed this? Is this meeting the expectations of the repair? And update the digital twin so that every car can benefit from this at the end of that process. This is the ecosystem we are trying to enable. And you will see today across the various work packages, you see a number of different numbers up there. That's different tasks happening throughout the team, trying to make that system possible. And of course, at the same time, we're trying to link to all these data sets you see up there, road user data, sensor data, historical data, and so on, because a lot of the decisions need that type of data to get to an answer. Now, having said this, I will now switch back another 50 slides. So give me a moment, and I'll pass on to what we've actually done as a result of that. Right, so I stopped here before. So I'll start with the digital twins, and then I'll pass on to Lavindra for the rest of our work. So in our first year on the digital twin space, we focused on understanding user and information requirements from national highways and coastal. That included an extensive literature review, several interviews with our partners, surveys, and so on. And as a result of that, we're nearly there to publish our information delivery manual. This manual explains, in the context of maintenance, how the world operates today in terms of national highways. Every single process detailed very clearly, with all the information steps along the way. But it also explains how should national highways operate if I had a digital twin supporting this process. How would this disrupt everything if I had better information? Okay, the before and the after. As a second step, we're looking, using that information to then derive the foundation data model, reference data libraries, and integration architecture for the context of highways. And I have some things to present on that. So you see here some snippet from the IDM that talks about the processes we have in place, the information, and how the digital twin should support all of that. But more importantly, to talk about the cloud architecture, we're looking at a platform that is powered by the usual suspects. It could be Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services, or in our case, the one we found most suitable is NVIDIA's Omniverse. Both for its AI capabilities, NVIDIA is really strong in that space, but also from its graphics capabilities. It's a very amazing platform to represent 3D information. And then on top of that, we're bringing in the product and the process. And the product in this case is a graph. Think of a GraphDB system that allows us to link information together. And by that, what I mean is that, for example, in the context of maintenance, National Highways has, from our investigation, 50 separate databases that don't talk to each other by design, including recent databases that are recently put in place. We're not asking National Highways to cancel these 50. We're saying we're going to link them together, right? This is what the graph will do, bring that information together. And in doing so, enable the various processes, the analytics, the data science, to be possible, because now I can query information across different setups. Then you have, of course, your application programming interface towards connected vehicle data or IoT devices and so on. And that links to a security layer, which is very, very important. I mean, if we didn't have security here, there's no way we could convince National Highways or anyone else to adopt any of this. And so we have to make sure we get this right, and this is why we are discussing with National Highways Cyber Futures team to understand how to best integrate your security systems within this ecosystem. And finally, you have the users. And who are the users? It's the humans and the machines. The humans are the employees, the customers, the decision makers. The machines are the vehicles, the survey equipment, and others. And both need access to data, and both need the right protocols to connect to this. We have done quite a lot of conceptual work on this. This is just a very high-level view, and we're now diving very quickly into implementation to put this in place. On our second task, which is how to generate and update digital twins, we've done a lot of work on looking at raw data from the field, point clouds, images, and so on, and how can we automatically detect both the geometries and the defects. So this includes detecting not just the road, but also the lane markings, the median barriers, the crash barriers, the street lights, everything, all the road furniture, and then all the issues on those road furniture, the defects on every single one of these aspects. And there's a couple of images there from examples of a street light and a road sign and cracks and so on. The way we're looking at this is a very holistic process. Something we've learned very early on is that from feedback we had in the past, if you detect cracks, I'm not interested because I still have to send someone to find everything else, right? So either you find everything for me or it's not valuable. And so we're looking at methods that can find everything and bring that in the same system. What's next for us in this process is to complete that work, complete the information delivery manual, the foundation data model, and so on, and then use that and AI techniques to start generating solutions for the second step, and then bring that on to our prototype, which we hope to have within, certainly before the end of next year, but hopefully within the next 6 months. But also we're looking at a very challenging step of how to fuse national highways data within that system. And this is an area where we need a lot of help from national highways to understand how to get access to your information. This is appearing to be our #1 problem. So, Lavindra?
Thanks very much. Cool, so the rest of the presentation will follow kind of a similar format. We'll talk about each of the other quadrants of this circle, what was promised in the proposal, and what we've actually done very quickly. I can't talk about all the details because I've not got much time. Is that? Let me have a look. I don't think that's the right time, but I've got it here. Okay, so smart materials. So what was promised as part of the first year was basically to gather the requirements and prioritize the operational phase requirements and challenges, as well as the requirements in the context of latest research. So basically, I jumped straight into what was delivered, what was created as deliverables, and what was actually done to address these tasks and objectives in the proposal. So the first outcome was to actually create a roadmap, a high-level kind of a strategic roadmap about how the research should progress from the smart materials theme in this whole program. So that started talking about, for example, what are the current existing technologies that are already out there to solving similar problems to us. So what are other universities and organizations doing already? Literature review of that to be able to figure out the gaps and see what else needs to be solved in the context of this particular program. So for example, there was a discussion about focusing on the low-hanging technologies, if you like, gaining the necessary skills to be able to develop those technologies before you focus on this slightly more complicated technologies going forward, as well as building lab-scale validation and data integration platforms, and so on. So there's a document that has come out as a deliverable. I won't go into the details because it's already out there, which could be read if you would like. And that was the first focus area for this particular theme of smart materials. So the second focus area, which is also linked to that, is to kind of try to figure out, given a high-level challenge, if you like, what is the specific technology that should be used to be able to solve that challenge? So to do that, there was this giant hierarchy created, which I won't be able to go into the details. There's an example shown here. So given a high-level challenge, what are the sub-challenges, what are the solutions, what are the sub-solutions, and eventually narrowing down that massive space to specific technologies that you would use to solve that challenge. So that's yet another document, deliverable 2.2, which is at the core of it is this giant decision tree together with a description of how to use that tree. So it's a method, it's an approach to be able to figure out the technologies, the smart materials technologies that you should use to be able to solve the specific challenge that you have. So that's one of the other outputs. So there's a couple of things promised for the second year as well, which has already started. For example, in particular, exploring the development of smart materials. There were various deliverables promised as a result of that objective. And I'll go through some of them. I won't be able to go through all of them, but I will mention the others. And there's a poster outside. If you'd like to go and talk to the actual experts who have done the work, feel free to do so during the breaks. So one of the big pieces of work that came out of this particular focus area was the selection of commercial repair material candidates. So there's a large survey done of available commercial repair materials, shortlisting based on various criteria to be able to come up with, let's say, the 6 or a short list of the material candidates that we should be experimenting with, at least at the theoretical level, through discussions, through workshops, through site visits, and so on. So what is the short list of the materials we should be focusing on? And then as a next step, let's go into the lab and actually start working with these materials to figure out, okay, what actually works in the context of this project. So these were the materials that were shortlisted. Again, the details can be, you can discuss the details at the poster outside during the break. But the gist of it was that shortlisting and then going into the lab to be able to experiment with the materials and figure out a further short list of, okay, this is what seems to be working in practice. So some of the materials were received and the experiments have started in the lab. The experiments are basically checking various properties of the material, such as compressive strength, density, and so on. And you can see a picture of, I think, Hussam in the lab working on this. So that was yet another task that was promised as part of the proposal, which is well underway. Moving on to another case study, if you like, that made headlines was this 3D printing of a 3D printed head wall, which is a road asset, which was both 3D printed as well as instrumented. And the lesson learned as part of DRF in this particular case was how. So it's not necessarily the same material that I discussed before, but how do we interface with 3D printers? How does the robotics strand interface with the 3D printing work that's going on? So an API was developed that we would use as part of the DRF project, but this was another exercise that had real world impact, if you like. So what's the next step as far as this project goes? It would be to build a digital twin of the asset, as well as the capability to be able to monitor the 3D printing process, as well as the parameters of that process as part of the digital twin that is built using this case study. So that would be the next major step for this particular piece of work. So what's next for this theme in general? So continuing with those experiments in the lab for the materials, delivering a report that kind of summarizes all the learnings from those experiments. The materials-assisted low-resolution sensing is something that I didn't have time to discuss. It was a collaboration between this particular work package and the robotics work package, and as well as the data science work package. You can get the details at the poster outside. There's also an effort in the future to be able to build historical asset data. So what this means is that the digital twin that we're building relies a lot on external data coming in from the outside world. So for example, temperature data, other data that national highways might have, as well as other data that we are creating ourselves based on the learnings, based on the experiments that we're doing. So this in particular, the first focus area will be to understand what we call, to be able to understand ground penetrating radar data that we've already received from national highways. How do we interpret that? It's a bunch of colors to a non-expert. How do we interpret those colors and make use of it, either manually or using machine learning techniques? So that would be a big focus area for this particular bit of work going forward. So jumping straight into the data science focus area, we discussed a little bit of it as part of work package 1 that Ioannis presented already. So the data science work package is very closely linked with the digital twins work package because the data science processes form part of the processes of the digital twin. So I'll be brief in this particular update. So the main focus areas here, the main objectives were to understand the data sets that we are given by national highways, what are the access restrictions, which ones can we actually access, which ones would we never be able to access, for example, due to various reasons. And we have fortnightly meetings with people from national highways to clarify these things, which has been really helpful. Doing a data quality evaluation, so we are getting data, what is the quality of that data, which ones are usable and which ones are not, and integrating that data into the digital twin. So this is the data science strand, and data is obviously one of the key focus areas. How would we integrate that data from kind of a task perspective? So different tasks have different data needs, and the integration might be different. For example, for predictive analytics, the data that we need for that particular task might be different to the data that we need for some other task. So how do we integrate all of that data into the digital twin? So what's happened in that respect? So there is another report that is published that's also been reviewed by some of our partners. So this was talking about the data forms, the structures, the quality, and so on, the units, the access barriers, which ones are accessible and which ones are not. There's a report produced which is quite detailed, talking about all the data that we've reused as part of other work packages, as part of this work package. What's the resolution? What's the quality? Is it accessible? Who's given us that data? So there's a comprehensive report that is out there that people can download and read offline. So that's one of the deliverables. The other, probably the key focus area in the last couple of months has been to talk to national highways and to figure out what are the top 10 data science related processes that the data science team should be focusing on automating as a first step. So there are processes that are not data science related, but for the data science team, obviously, which are the ones that are data science related, trying to map those out, again, similar to some of the stuff that Ioannis talked about in work package 1, trying to understand them. And what would be the point of doing that? Well, the data science team needs to be able to build or to improve upon some sort of a baseline. So what is the baseline that we're trying to improve on? Well, the baseline is how it currently works in practice, how it currently works in the real world. So kind of trying to build the ground truth, if you like, for how things work in the real world from a data science perspective is what these discussions are trying to flesh out and conclude on. So just to summarize, the data science team, the main focus of the data science team is to contribute to that processes block of the overall architecture that Ioannis presented. In particular, to kind of build a decision model, taking into account all sorts of other sub-models for prediction, for cost predictions, for example, or for predicting what kind of potholes might exist 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the line on a given road segment, but taking into account these various factors as well: time, money, safety, sustainability in particular. So that would be, so building that decisional model as part of this particular component of the digital twin is the key focus for the data science team going forward. Well, what's next? I've kind of covered it a little bit, accessing and understanding the existing data sets, concluding on that work, concluding on what are the data sets that are available, which ones are relevant to data science, which ones should be the focus areas going forward. Learning the processes, not just the data, what are the current processes that are used by national highways that are data science specific, and what the data science team should be looking at automating. Developing methods and algorithms for data integration, like I said earlier. Quantifying the uncertainty is not something I mentioned already, but that is a key task that will need extra focus going forward because it's not a trivial task. Basically quantifying how much can you trust the data that is within a digital twin, how uncertain it is it. So for example, if you think about your Google Maps kind of specification about where you are at any given point in time, there's a certain kind of uncertainty bubble. And what is that uncertainty bubble as far as the data science team goes? So in terms of the data that is in the digital twin, so that's a difficult piece of work that needs to be continued. And developing methods to evaluate the data quality. So we've already got kind of the literal quality of the data that is given to us, the resolution and so on. what is the required quality for data? Is that quality good? So discussions along those lines, and writing up the relevant report. So that would be the focus for the data science team going forward. Moving on to automation and robotics, which is the final quadrant here. So these are the final, these are the four main focus areas. But there's also a work package on bringing it all together, which Ioannis kind of touched on, which I will also present after discussing these four quadrants. So this is work package 4. I will talk about work package 5, which is not shown on the figure there. So some of the main focus areas for the automation and robotics theme was to work with work package 2, which is the smart materials theme. You can't really work separately because smart materials and robotics is very closely related. Robotics might deal with, for example, 3D printing, but you're 3D printing the materials. So you have to work very closely together. But one of the focus areas maybe for the robotics strand by itself was to develop a simulation of how you would 3D print, develop a simulation of how cars would go on the road and take low resolution scans of defects, for example, make decisions about whether that's a real defect or something worth worrying about, inform the digital twin. So that whole story about the front end of the platform that Ioannis just presented earlier. So coming up with a simulation for that. There's a simulation running in a loop in the other room there. I will also show you a 40-second version of it coming up in a sec. So one of the focus areas for the automation and robotics team have been to figure out, okay, so we know that modern vehicles are able to come with inbuilt sensors, and they're able to sense the world, do low resolution scans of the world, maybe even do point cloud scans. So can we rebuild what an autonomous vehicle or a semi-autonomous vehicle, such as a Mercedes car or a JLR, Jaguar Land Rover vehicle would be able to do? So the point here was to bolt on our own sensor onto one of our own vehicles, drive around, see how the data is coming in, see how fast the data comes in, to be able to figure out, to get a sense of how we would need to kind of interface that incoming data streams with the digital twin that we're building. So this was basically to understand that and to build a data set, a corresponding data set, and to publish the data set as well. But mainly also to inform the simulation element. So we want to be able to simulate the vehicle that is doing this low resolution scanning of the roads. And that was kind of a real world exercise. This is the simulated version. So this is already well underway to build a simulator of a vehicle, to redo all the algorithms that would exist on a real car, but in simulation, and to kind of do the necessary corresponding implementation as well. So I'll jump straight into a video of this. So you might see some low resolution images here of some of the road signs. This is not the fault of work package 4. It's basically because some of the data that we received from Corec had gaps, essentially because there were, for example, things blocking the road signs. So some of these have gaps. We are showing it as it is, but it's quite easy to fill these gaps. And as you can see in the demo outside, these gaps have been filled. So this is a slightly older video. So I'll basically, that video didn't play. Let me have a look. I might need to play it manually. So I'll play this for a couple of seconds and then move on to the rest of what was done in work package 4. So you'll be able to see that, so you've already seen the virtualize outside. So we've been creating a data set from various road segments that we've been given. So the main point here is that it's that exact same data set that is used by work package 4 to be able to simulate a vehicle going on the road, and in particular detecting assets on the road, but in the future detecting also defects, potholes, and so on, detecting the crash barrier and other assets and defects on those assets. Yeah.
The question that was posed by Phil was,
yeah,
why is it driving on the wrong side of the road?
Oh, this is probably in another country. I need to ask Richard. But that's a good point. That's not something I noticed.
The road signs are
The road signs are British, but on the wrong end.
That's true, yeah.
We were wondering if it's because the camera's looking backwards. It's just
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the camera is able to get get images in more than one direction. So, I mean,
Don't worry, I still really like it.
yeah. That's a good point, yeah. But yeah, so, yeah, sure.
Which is, it's interesting you're using, and I'm Sarah Shops, I'm the Chief
Yeah.
Scientific Advisor for the Department of Transport. So you're obviously using visual methods to detect defects and
Yeah.
information at the moment. Are you also going to be looking at integration of, for example, vibration sensing or
Exactly, yeah.
or anything like that?
So that's a good point. So in fact, we published a paper recently about that. So how do we integrate other modalities to be able to gain richer insights about, for example, the fact that you went over a pothole could be, that insight could be gained from vibration readings or accelerometer data, combined with the fact that you saw the pothole as well on the ground, but you also felt it. So combining these various modalities is something we actually started working on, and we've published on that. But we need to take it to the next level, if you like, to be able to combine that at the level of the digital twin, not just infer, not just make those decisions at the level of the autonomous vehicle, but to kind of make more informed decisions using data science techniques, for example, at the level of the digital twin. But yeah, it's definitely something that we've started working on. And I can point you to a paper later if you like. So other than driving on the wrong side of the road, so the main point here was that we are using an actual segment of the A12 that you might have seen outside. If not, please go there at the break and have a look at the virtualizer. So the car is driving on that realistic segment of road, and it's starting to detect various issues with the road. This is not quite an issue, the fact that you're detecting assets. We need to really detect potholes, cracks, and so on. And that is something that is ongoing and an exciting piece of work to commence. So moving on to some of the other work that's happened as far as Work Package 4 is concerned. So Work Package 4, like I said, is working closely with the Smart Materials team to be able to simulate some of the 3D printing activities that the Smart Materials team might be doing physically in the lab. So some of this, the gist of this work is basically to be able to come up with a realistic simulation of what is going on in practice. So you see what's going on in practice on the left. You see the simulation on the right. The idea is to be able to match the simulation as closely as possible to the real world experiment, and then test the simulation to see if it's able to predict how something would be printed well enough, and if not, close that loop, go back and improve the simulation based on the data that you're receiving from the simulator. So the point of doing this is actually to build the autonomous maintenance vehicle bit in Ioannis's platform diagram from before. So what you saw earlier, earlier was the simulation of the car. This would be part of the simulation of the autonomous maintenance vehicle, which would be doing the repairs doing the road repairs based on 3D printing and any other techniques that we decide to use going forward. So that's one of the pieces of work that was done as part of Work Package 4 by a PhD student. And again, more details, if you'd like more details, please talk to some of the researchers at the poster session outside. So what's next as far as this work package goes? Communication and collaboration with maintenance vehicle companies. So the 3D printing activities that you saw earlier is supposed to be done by an autonomous maintenance vehicle that is triggered by the digital twin, as Ioannis mentioned, that goes off and fixes defects on the road, for example. So talking to such companies is important. Establishing and maintaining maintaining a communication with the digital twin. So the autonomous car that takes low resolution images needs to be linked up with the digital twin to be able to kind of send not necessarily the low resolution images, but decisions made regarding the low resolution images. So that link basically with the digital twin needs to exist, and it doesn't exist at this point. Coming up with the simulator and algorithms and so on. So the simulator that you saw is not published yet. It needs to be made open access and released to the outside world, just like we've done with the data set. And investigating the simulation of anticipated road defects and so on. So improving on, on the simulation. So being able to simulate more realistic things such as material physics is actually a hot research area, which is ongoing work and a priority going forward. So I've kind of finished with the 4 quadrants. I will talk next about how we are kind of bringing all of this work together to form part of the platform, as well as to release a data set, kind of a cleaned up and a prepared data set based on the data that we've received so far from our partners, especially from National Highways and Corrick. So work package 5 then is about delivering impact using the work that is coming, using the work as well as input from researchers that are working on the other 4 work packages, bringing them together and delivering a data set and releasing that data set. So what did that? So what was promised as part of the proposal was to basically prepare and publish the data set, as well as this Ioannis discussed. So I won't be going into the details, but preparing that digital roads platform, if you like. So the whole story about how a vehicle goes out and does a survey of the road, takes low resolution images, sends some of that information to the digital twin. The digital twin makes decisions, triggers an autonomous maintenance vehicle to go ahead and fix road defects and so on. So that whole story kind of summarizing that in terms of an architectural diagram, as well as starting some of the implementation work for that story is one of the deliverables. So I'll start talking about the data set and what we did to that end. So we've received data from various modalities of data from National Highways. The road segments for which we've received data are shown on the map here. So overall, it's about 40 plus kilometers of data. For the A11, A12, and A14, the segments are shown on the map there. There are 5 modalities that we dealt with. So laser scans, so point clouds from laser scans, which are probably the most accurate representation of the real world compared to images, for example. We've received pavement images, ground penetrating radar, panoramic images, thermal images, and so on. Well, that's it, actually. So just a quick screenshot of what each of these modalities might look like. So point cloud data is shown on the top left there. There were various point clouds from various runs of those road segments, which were combined into one point cloud, which improved the density, as well as you have one correct reference point. So that was some of the work that we needed to do for the point clouds. We had pavement images looking down on the pavement using a special kind of high-resolution camera. There were issues with the images which we needed to correct. You can see shadows here. But they were high-resolution images just looking straight down at the pavement. And so it didn't look outside of the pavement. So we couldn't see, for example, the road signs and so on. And that information needed to be extracted from the panoramic data. So the panoramic data obviously is panoramic. So you can see things other than just the road. You can see street signs. You can see crash barriers. You can see road signs, traffic lights, and so on. And we've received some other forms of data as well, ground penetrating radar, which tells you what's going on under the ground surface. And one question right now is how we can actually use that data meaningfully, and how people can interpret the colors that are shown in this GPR data. So this is the raw format. We needed to actually do some heavy processing of this raw format to be able to get point clouds that could then be integrated with the rest of the modalities in our overall.
So we've moved that on since this, so we probably need to have another conversation.
Okay, yeah, okay, good to know. Thank you. Moving on to some of the work that was done. So 10:45, so I've got 30 minutes. So to some of the work that was actually done to be able to process this data. So I'm going to go step by step, not spending too much time on each of these, but giving you the gist of the story. So data processing, the data processing workflow for pavement images. So one of the things that we needed to do with the pavement images, so the images that were just looking down on the ground, if you recall there was a shadow on those images, was to firstly label the defects on those images. So the labeling of the defects initially was done completely manually, somebody looking at the defects and manually labeling it, and eventually we started using data science techniques to help us label these images to be able to create the ground truth of what the world really looks like for the digital twin. We needed to do another process which we needed to build by ourselves, which took a bit of time, which was to auto-rectify those images. So the images actually look like you're looking at the road from the driver's seat. We needed to look at the road from basically to have a bird's eye view. So we had to convert the images from the driver's seat view to a drone camera view, because we needed to be able to stitch those images together, and to be able to stitch the images, the lane markings shouldn't be in a V shape. They should literally be parallel to each other so that they can all be stitched all along the 40 kilometers. So we needed to do this. These are probably the main operations that we needed to do, which results in eventually this output, which is labeled, which is shown in green here, a textured labeled pavement mesh, I'll show you examples of that on the next slide. But to do that, we needed a mesh of the pavement to begin with. We have images, orthorectified images, but they needed to be draped with a mesh of the pavement. But how do you get a mesh of the pavement? So we needed to do some other processing starting from these multiple A14 point clouds. You register the point clouds together so that you just have one point cloud. You create a mesh of you create meshes of all of the assets that you see in the point cloud, including the pavement, including the crash barriers, the road signs, the lamp posts, and so on. And you get two databases out of that. One is the mesh of the pavement itself, the road, which you can drape with the images to get that output. And the rest is meshes of assets. So the other assets other than the pavement itself. So what do you do with that? You label that, and you get this other output that we needed as part of the data set, which is labeled road asset meshes. You needed to do a couple of other things as well. You needed to take those labeled road asset meshes and drape that with images taken from the panoramic camera, because the panoramic camera is the only camera that gives you images of what is outside of the road pavement itself. So that draping gave you some of the road signs that you see in the demo outside, which is detailed, textured meshes of what the road signs look like. Now, in some of the image samples that I showed you earlier, there were holes in those meshes. The holes are only because we didn't want to fill up the holes just to show you what reality looked like. And the point there is to be able to come up with as accurate as possible a representation of reality based on the density of the data that we had. Now, we can beautify it. We can use photogrammetry. We can beautify it as much as we want. But the point there, despite the holes, was to come up with as accurate a mesh of the road signs and the road and everything else as possible. And the next step is quite easy just to fill up those holes and make it look more beautiful. But if somebody wanted to, for example, measure the size of a crack, the size of graffiti, the size of a correction to a road sign that you needed to do, we can do that with our data set just because it's as accurate as the point cloud allowed it to be. So textured meshes of road signs, taken from panoramic images. GPR data also had to be processed, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, that's probably all I wanted to say. Some examples of outputs there. This is an example of output created by yet another piece of software, just to have some diversity there. The software that you will see outside is not this. That's Unreal Engine and Unity. This is made by ArcGIS, just to show you that this data set can be used by more than one piece of software. Having said that, the data set that we have released is not particular to a piece of software. It is a data set that you can use in any way you want to use it, but it can be viewed in various pieces of off-the-shelf software or put together in the way that Lilia is doing it using Unreal Engine. Anyway, these are just some examples. Again, as I said, the mesh has holes. These holes can be filled quite trivially, but this is what it looks like based on the actual data that we received. This is GPR data showing you what's under the surface. How exactly do you interpret that? That's a big question. That's an ongoing and exciting piece of research going forward. But we do have the data. We do have the raw data. Yeah.
Just wanted to add one more point in this exercise. So a lot of the data we received from COREC was data that was procured from National Highways for a very specific purpose. So can you please go and collect this for me for that particular use, right? The problem was that the data was then just good enough for that one use. Once you try to bring it together with everything else, it just wouldn't fit. And an exercise that was supposed to take us a couple months ended up taking us a year. So this was a lot of pain that the team had to go through to bring everything together. But that pain is then translated into a quick win, I would say, for National Highways, a better understanding of how should National Highways procure such data sets in the future so that they come in correct to begin with. And they don't need massive corrections to get to a point where they can actually be used for multiple purposes, not just a single purpose. And so this is what's coming up here. And this is not an ideal data set, but that's because it came in from multiple data sets that were never meant to work together and only meant to use for specific purposes, whereas here we're trying to use it for multiple. Yeah, back to you.
So yeah, like I said, some examples. What did I mean by a textured mesh of a road sign? Well, that's what it looks like. Like I said, these holes, it's trivial to fill these holes. It's just a click of a button. But I just wanted to show you what reality looks like based on the quality of the data that was coming in. Again, this is an intermediate piece of data. This is a mesh of a road sign that has not yet been textured. Once it is textured, it looks something like that. GPR data underground. This is the textured mesh of the road pavement itself. So based on auto-rectified pavement images, as well as labeling that was done initially by some students, but then semi-automated using data science techniques. It tells you where the issues are. It's color-coded the issues to tell you that yellow, for example, corresponds to a crack of some sort, and so on. So moving on to the data set and the release of the data set. Oh, sorry, there's a slide before that. Limitations, we already talked about the limitations, so I'll skip this slide. Basically, some of the limitations that we want to avoid if we redo this survey going forward, which is actually the point. We want to try and redo a survey of a different segment of road and use similar techniques to what we've already developed to be able to get a nicer looking digital twin, provided the input looks nicer and the input is correct as far as we are concerned. So for example, in the data set that we received, the images weren't overlapping enough, and we needed the images to overlap enough so that we can create a nicer looking orthomosaic of the road. So because they didn't overlap enough, we needed to develop our own algorithms to be able to create this orthomosaic, which is not something we had planned to do. They were given to us at different stages of readiness, raw data versus registered data. So some of the registration we needed to do ourselves, but that was fine. It's just we have the process now. Panoramic pavement, point cloud. So some of the data was available for all the 40 plus kilometers, and some of the data was only available for a subset of that 40 kilometers. So understandably so, I mean, getting GPR data is difficult. You need to block the road. It's a much slower vehicle. So we didn't have data, all the modalities for the entire 40 kilometers, which you will notice if you download the data set and have a look at it. That's just a disclaimer. And some assets, like Ioannis said as well, had issues. For example, the density was lower because the assets were blocked by vegetation, but that's simply the quality of the point clouds that we received, and that has implications on what the final product looks like, which is this. And to correct that in the future, we might do another data set release if we've got a significant release, a significant improvement to the data set compared to what we've got at the moment. So the data set we've got at the, oh, there's music here. Okay, so the data set we've got at the moment, well, looks like that on Unreal Engine. It may look slightly different on ArcGIS. It might look slightly different on your favorite display platform. It can be accessed from this website. It's quite a couple of terabytes. Thanks to Sifia for providing access to that data set on their platform. It is a NAS box, so you might need to, you'd probably need to get a VPN before you access the data. It includes each modality registered with each other. My suspicion is that people are not going to use the data set in the exact same way that we've used it. You may want only the orthomosaics of the pavement to do some data science, try some data science techniques to be able to detect potholes and cracks automatically, or you may only want the point clouds and you may want to segment the point clouds using your own techniques, or whatever it is, but the full data set is available at that address. That URL at the top. We will share these slides later so that you can go to that website. But I will probably let this play for a couple more seconds, and after it finishes driving, I'll probably move on. So as you can see, the vegetation appears as point clouds because we don't need to mesh the vegetation. It's not something interesting enough for us to mesh. Vegetation can just be there. But the rest of it needed to be meshed and textured. Okay, this can be, you can see this in the demonstration outside, so I'll skip this and move on to, well, this was already discussed as well, so I can probably skip some of this. So this was discussed by Ioannis. I will skip this, and I will just touch upon the fact that each of the contributions to the platform was given by the various work packages. This is probably not entirely accurate in the sense that, for example, work package 2 also worked a little bit on the front end of this platform, but this is the core focus areas for each of the work packages as far as the platform is concerned. So a little bit more about the platform. So we ran, so to be able to flesh out the details of this high-level conceptual diagram, so what are the details for each of these components? So what in particular would be the processes for this bit, the processes for this bit, how would they interact with one another, what would be the data that's relevant to each of these components. So to be able to kind of flesh that out, we ran a couple of workshops with the whole team as well as some of the partners who joined in. So it was a 3-day workshop focusing on the first day on the autonomous car, the front end, on the second day on the digital twin, and on the third day on the autonomous maintenance vehicle. A couple of sketches on the whiteboard there, but the main gist of the discussions were, for the autonomous car, how would we gather low resolution data from existing cars? We're not going to build the car, we're going to use existing cars that are already capable of gathering low resolution data. How would we use that and send it to the digital twin that we are building? What is the data that would be relevant? How do we fuse the various modalities of data together? For example, information about the weather, information about humidity, information about traffic flow, would that be relevant? What is the data that would be relevant? And this was already documented as well in the form of a paper, in the form of a report, which would become a paper going forward. I think that's already available online as well, or maybe it needs to be polished a little bit before we release it. Moving on to the second day, that was a discussion about the digital twin. So this would be making decisions on behalf of the car and the autonomous maintenance vehicle. The car would be telling it what's wrong with the road, and it would be making decisions about when to trigger the autonomous vehicle, which road defects are important enough to worry about and which can be kept aside for now, and so on. So what would be the architecture for the digital twin? That was kind of fleshed out as part of this day 2 workshop, the second day of the 3-day workshop. And again, that was documented as part of a report, which might need to be slightly polished before we release it, but it is available online. Well, internally anyway. And the third day was about the back end of that platform diagram about the autonomous maintenance vehicle. This was about gathering high resolution data. So when a maintenance vehicle is triggered to go to a specific place to fix or look at a defect, it takes a high resolution scan of that issue, figures out what exactly is the problem, or is there really a problem. If there is, it fixes it, and again takes another high resolution scan of what it had done to fix it. So that part of the story was again fleshed out, kind of documented as a third report, which can be made available soon. Moving on to exploitation. So this was basically another task in work package 5. The two main objectives were to quantify the intellectual property, create business model canvases for each of these 3 parts of the platform, figure out which elements are worth commercializing and which ones are not worth or too difficult to commercialize. So that was the point of this exploitation exercise. Again, it was done also as part of those 3 days in the 3-day workshop to come up with business model canvases for each of these. I won't go into the details. This is available as Excel sheets online. But the gist of it for the first day of discussions about the autonomous car was that we wouldn't be building the car. We will be, as Ioannis said earlier, we will be using cars that are already out there on the road. So what would be the business case? So this was more about looking at who are the partners, who are the car companies we will be working with, and what would they be providing to us. So that was the gist of the discussion here. It didn't make sense for us to kind of commercialize this particular element, except for maybe licensing out the IP based on the outputs from this particular part of the project. Again, the details are available online if you'd like to read it online. The second part, on the second day of the discussions, we talked about the business model canvas for the digital twin. That seems to be the most viable commercialization option, just because I should probably mention for the previous one as well that this is entirely done in simulation. So it's not, we're not going to build, we don't have the funds, we haven't requested for the funds from the EPSRC to actually build an autonomous vehicle. So this will always be done in simulation. This one, on the other hand, the digital twin, is a piece of software. So that seems to be a focus area that we can actually focus on and get it done to some extent to a certain level of TRL 3 or 4. And with the help from this company that we are teaming up with, we might be able to take it up to TRL 7 or 8 with their help. So commercial value seems to be mainly in this part of the overall platform on the digital twin, partly because it's a software-based endeavor. The third one, again, is the same story as the front end of the platform. Commercializing the autonomous maintenance vehicle, we don't have funds to be able to do this in practice. We don't have funds to be able to do this outside of simulation. So building of the autonomous maintenance vehicle, the specification of the design, and so on, creating of the blueprint for how that vehicle looks like is something we could come up with as an exercise, as a research exercise, as an output as part of this project, but we wouldn't actually be building the vehicle. So it'll be a case of licensing out the IP to companies that are capable of, that have the funds and the resources to be able to build autonomous maintenance vehicles. And clearly, for example, National Highways is doing some of that, even if it's not fully autonomous or even semi-autonomous. But yeah, there are other companies who might be able to take this on from us and continue and actually take it out into the real world. So this seemed less commercially viable than the digital twin. So that was the conclusion from the workshops. And there was a decision made to fast track the digital twin commercialization as a conclusion from the workshop. So to this end, we've started kind of teaming up with a company called Sophia. I think Ioannis has a couple of slides that he will present in a second. Actually, I might finish my presentation and hand it over to you because I've only got a couple of slides after this. So the whole point of this collaboration would be that the digital roads project, will be kind of slowing down towards the latter half of the 5 years. So this is a research program which will be handing over both skills and knowledge and people to this company. So there will be kind of collaboration right throughout, and eventually, while digital roads kind of winds down, Sophia will take on the commercialization aspect and take it forward from once the digital roads project is completely over. I will give this to you once I've finished the rest of my slides, just so that I don't have to come back again. Dissemination, just very quickly. So Ioannis will talk a little bit about that company in a second, but dissemination was about basically coming up with these 3 deliverables. This was also part of Work Package 5. So the basic idea was to create a public presence for the digital roads project. Annual reports that we need to do to the PSRC, get that done on time, as well as run workshops and presentations and record lectures and so on for the purposes of education and capturing pretty much all the knowledge that comes out of the project, basically. So a lot of this was done. There is a website which you might already be aware of. There's a YouTube channel. There's a LinkedIn page where updates come regularly. The website has updates a bit less regularly, but anything relevant to the website goes up there as soon as we can put it up there. But these are all available, and these were deliverables promised, which has happened. There is also the annual report to the PSRC. So some of the numbers you can see here, I won't go into the details. But the publications that are coming out, the collaborations that are coming out, the engagement activities that have happened, site visits as part of Work Package 2, for example, that are all counted as part of those engagement activities. Research data sets. So the data set that I talked about just before was the main data set that needed to be produced as part of this project in the first year. There are some other data sets that have come out as part of PhD programs, PhD projects done by students as well, which were documented as part of this research fish submission to the PSRC, as well as awards and recognition. So this has been done on time, as well as videos and recorded lectures and all of that, which were supposed to put up on YouTube. They have gone up on YouTube. I'm not sure why the other 2 videos are not playing. Doesn't really matter. But there are videos online on the YouTube channel, as well as other videos that are coming out to kind of advertise the program and talk to people about what the program is about at some high level. So what's next? Reviewing the IP and figuring out what the IP plan is for this program, supporting uptake by transport sector stakeholders, developing a backbone platform, the platform that Ioannis discussed and I discussed as well, and identifying pathways to the market to create an adoption strategy, and continuing with the dissemination activities to establish an online presence.
The introduction on this was already given by Lavindra, but to add to that introduction, we were challenged this summer by our business PI, Tim Embley. I want to see results now. I cannot wait 3 or 4 years. We need to commercialize. How do we do this? So we picked up on this challenge, and we put together a team with Dr. Kyriakos Kandaratias and Alex Gillis, who you can talk to if you want during the break and later today, to try to see how we can do that in parallel with the research, so that one informs the other. And so by the time the research program is done, the company is already well in place and able to deliver outcomes. And so what the company will be doing is focusing on that exploitation plan. It's, you can think of it as an investigation vehicle, trying to do some customer discovery, understand the right business model, what are the right revenue streams, the right KPIs to focus on, not just to get the technology right, but to get the business side of it right, and see whether there is an immediate target as well as a longer term target, and what would be the role of also all the other partners involved in this and how they can engage in that. So the target is to produce a commercially viable digital twins platform that meets national highway specifications once we're passed through our fundraising route we're going on right now. I think we already know the problem in this context. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We're looking at addressing the interoperability challenge. We're looking at addressing how to bring digital twins into this sector and to build the kind of platform that can address this. I think it's more interesting to show you this slide. We're trying to get this company to be an information platform that tailors to the needs of this industry. And as a scale-up process, we are focusing first on this target. How can we make interoperability possible? Basically, lossless exchange of information, the ability to query multiple databases from a single place without having to visit them separately across all formats and platforms. As a second step, how can we take that further into twin systems, digital and physical twins working together through this type of platform? And the longer term target is what I would say professional data curation. How can we organize and make information trustworthy? And how can we make sure that construction stakeholders can focus on delivery and not on how to exchange information? Where we are with this, we are at the very, very beginning. The company was just founded literally a few weeks ago. And so we're now fundraising and speaking to several VCs, both in the UK and other countries, the US and others, and having loads of meetings with them. And we would like also to have these discussions with any of the businesses involved, Costain or others who might be interested in investing in this venture. But very soon after that, once we have the funds in place, we'll be focusing entirely on developing a better product so that we have something in place within 6 months for users to test, and also on customer discovery, meeting with potential customers and understanding what is value proposition to them, what are the right revenue streams that would be appropriate for them, and so on, so that the interface is seamless. And within a year, we're looking at an MVP launch that can start the company into a path of profitability, generating income with customers. And at the same time, we are working with the university, with Costain, with National Highways, to bring the company on board as a partner to Digital Roads so that they have an official role within this. And I believe, Kyriako, you're presenting this slide better than me, but I think what you're saying here is that we already have a sense of what the value proposition is, but we're pretty sure that that's not entirely correct, and this is why we want to be talking with you to get it right. So I'm sure Kyriakos and Alex would be keen to talk to you in the break. If you're interested to have a chat with them, please do get in touch. They want to do this collaboratively, and we all want to do this together.